Joining us. This is our second of the Fall Farminar series in 2011. My name is Luke Gran, host and PFI staffer, Practical Farmers of Iowa. We are happy to have you here for our second, as I've said in this fall series, Wholesale Marketing with Distributors, What Farmers Need to Know. We are very grateful for our support from the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. The USDA grant number, as you see on the bottom of your screen, very important support from the federal government to make sure that we can provide this service to beginning farmers and other folks who are interested in getting started. And this is our third year of doing these, and we have over 36 in our archives. Our recordings are online, practicalfarmers.org/Farminar. What is Practical Farmers of Iowa? We are an open, supportive, diverse group of folks who are advancing profitable, ecologically sound, and community-enhancing approaches to agriculture. We're all about farmer-to-farmer networking, sharing information, sharing ideas, and testing those ideas with rigorous on-farm research. We want beginners to succeed all across the state of Iowa, and we have many things in the works to help folks from our Find a Farmer, place to look for land, and getting networked with landowners that want to work with you. Our Savings Incentive Program, which is a great way to develop beginning entrepreneurs through matching with mentors, helping write business plans, and even getting a savings match, dollar-for-dollar savings match, after a 2-year commitment to attending networking events with Practical Farmers of Iowa. We also have 30 field days each year where you can go to farms and visit with folks and learn from farmers directly. Join today, practicalfarmersofiowa.org/join. It's a great organization, well worth your investment. An annual membership is just $35 for an individual or $45 for the entire farm. We have many more events coming up this off-season. First off is the Richard Wiswall Next Generation Retreat, December 8th and 9th, just over here in Boone, Iowa, central Iowa. Registrations are due November 15th. Please follow that link on your screen. We'd love to have you in the event. We already have 38 folks registered, and it should be a really good time to learn about a bunch of different business planning goals, setting goals for how to do financial sheets, for example. We'll be putting together balance sheets, cash flows, and income statements with your own numbers. And Richard Wiswall is a great farmer from Vermont flying out to help folks with that strategy and with that challenge for first-time beginning farmers. Our annual conference is a great way to get together with over 350 of our members. Our conference title this year is Made from Scratch, and it's going to be held in Ames this year on January 12th, 13th, and 14th. We've added an extra day just for soils on the 12th of January. Soils classes taught by Iowa State University soils experts. Please register by following the link to your screen there, and if you register by the end of December, you can save a bundle of money. So please join us. We'd love to have you. Well, I'd love to pass this right along to our wonderful speakers we've lined up today. I wanted to make one note. We have an adjustment in our speakers. We were planning on having the Holes from Southeast Iowa, but they had a family medical event come up, and they had to cancel at the last minute. But our good friend Mike Gooder from Stone Creek Farms, plant peddler in Northeast Iowa, has stepped in, and we're very grateful for him. And also joining us is Phil Danowsky from Local Harvest Supply. So let's hear about wholesale marketing with distributors. Let's begin with Mike. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, I should be. If you can hear me all right. Luke?
I do.
Welcome, everybody. This is my...
Thank you, Mike. You may...
Go ahead. So I think I have the floor, right? Luke, you hear me okay? So I'll give you a little bit of background of Plant Peddler. Our organization started in 1980. My wife and I are graduates of Iowa State University with horticultural degrees. If you remember back in the 80s, there were very few hort jobs and quite a few graduates. It's kind of the opposite today. We have a need for good young students coming through, so if there are those out there thinking about a horticultural career, there's definitely demand within our industry. We purchased a small local greenhouse that I worked at in college and high school in my hometown, and over the years we've grown into about 8 acres of covered production area with marketing throughout all states, all Canadian provinces, importing from about 15 countries, and we export to about 6 or 8 countries outside the United States annually. We always are looking for ways of diversifying our farming operation. We consider ourselves farmers. We're blessed with having a farm background. Myself, also from an entrepreneurial standpoint, my dad was always in businesses. That led us to what I think is a nice blend of agriculture with marketing and technology at the greenhouse facilities. About 4 years ago, a little bit over, we attended a Northeast Iowa Food and Farm meeting for producers. The NIF Coalition, as it's known up here in Northeast Iowa, which is our 6-county area up here in the corner of Iowa, had received funding from the Kellogg Foundation to look into local food systems and how we might improve what's available to our community for health and also economic reasons. Rachel, my wife, myself, and 2 of our other people attended that meeting, and all 4 of us were quite moved by some of the statistics that came out, quite alarming to us, on the simple fact that Northeast Iowa buys more food in than it exports in food dollars. There's really no processing left up in this region other than a few small local lockers, and no processing of fruits and vegetables, and really no local market other than farmer markets, other than some Mennonite auctions for people to obtain local food. With that in mind, and also understanding that we have underutilized facilities, we endeavored into off-season production of vegetables with 2 things in mind. One was better utilization of facilities with sustainable production, and looking at ways that we could produce differently and reuse our plastics and our media more than one pass through the greenhouse, but also looking at ways of supporting local food systems, both from production at Plant Peddler and also being an aggregator for other small producers around us. So the vegetables really came to us through what was the NIF Coalition movement. That first year that we started in with vegetables in the greenhouse, in typical fashion of the way we do things at Plant Peddler, we produced, I believe it was 26 different crops within the greenhouses themselves, ranging from A through Z, arugula through zucchini. And during that process, we learned quite a bit about not only what would be capable of producing within greenhouse structures, but also developing markets, looking at different market segments, looking at the produce industry as a whole as far as standards, grades, weights, and measures. And of course, probably one of the most important parts is the food safety and security issues, because in production of ornamentals, we rarely concern ourselves with the safety aspect of what we produce. We normally produce safe products, but when you get in the food business, there's a whole new dynamic. Luke, I'm not finding the spot to move the screen forward. If there's additional slides you want me to show. So I guess we kind of covered this, gives you a little bit of idea about our company. Yeah, I don't see that bar down there, Stace. We do staff, typically we're about 40 people. We're just be banking up right now. We're coming to the point instead of shipping season. We're also picking quite a bit of fruits and veggies right now, because this is our season in which we produce quite a bit of veggies. This is the logo. Actually, we just recently completed a new look for the Stone Creek Farms division. Stone Creek Farms happens to be the farm that I grew up on, our family farm just outside of Cresco. Stone Creek runs through it. That same creek starts near our greenhouse ranges, one of the 3 branches that contributes to the stream. And within the logo, we tried to represent some of the products we produce. As you can see, there's some stone fruits, leafies, what is representation of herbs and berries. Just to give you an idea of the service area of our company, which definitely helps us on the distribution of local food, we currently service on a regular basis about a 7-8 state area with our own grower trucks. This does allow us the ability to reach quite a few markets. Our ultimate goal, though, with production of the vegetables is to try to keep the product within a geographic 100-mile local food circle. The other thing that we've come to understand, and you can see where our logo sits, that's fairly close to where Cresco is at. Even though we sit very close, within 9 miles of Minnesota and about 40 miles to Wisconsin, we have found Iowa grown sells much better in Iowa. It's been one of the complications because we do sit close to like Rochester, Minnesota, La Crosse, Wisconsin, and though we can reach those markets accessible very easily, we've had much better success within the region of Iowa. The primary products that we're producing at the moment, Mediterranean cucumbers are our #1 product. This is an extremely adaptable crop to the greenhouse. They're called alpha parthenocarpic, which means that they're seedless varieties. They have relatively thin skins, but they do hold up very well. We have extremely strong demand for this product. We really can't keep up to what the market's trying to pull from us. We produce these in 12-inch pots. We do recycle all of the plastics and media directly out of this. So we produce cucumbers during the off-season. That material then gets planted for spring and sold to consumers. So we get 2 passes out of our soils. Often we'll be able to produce up to 3 crops of cucumbers in the off-season before we pull and replant. And right now we're picking around 2,000 pounds a week. It varies within season. And our season of harvest on this crop runs a little bit different as far as we do drop out during the spring. We do come back in with summer, though demand has been equally as strong during the regular cucumber season. This gives you some overview of how the cucumber production looks within our operation from where we start. We've gone to row cover. If anybody's producing within frames or greenhouse structures, the row covers are extremely important for the management of thrips within your structures. There's a life cycle stage within the thrip that has to morph in soil. So by covering media, you eliminate that life cycle stage, so very good integrated pest management technique. Also, it helps reflect light back up into the crop and reduces water loss. And on a crop like cucumbers, they take a lot of water, so we were able to cut our water use by nearly 30% with row covers. As you can see, they're trained on simple twines. We have monofilament lines overhead. Probably the next biggest item in the production line of Plant Peddler are our leafy green mixes and blends. We produce in 6-inch what are known as azalea pots in the industry. We use our peat perlite media, and we produce a continuous rotation of lettuce. That crops for us about 2 weeks as producing a transplant and 30 additional days in final pot. We produce small butterhead types, oak leaves, various leaf types which we blend back. It's been very popular, excellent taste, very clean product, and grown very culturally sustainable. This time of year we also blend that material back in with some of our winter mixes and with spinach. Probably one of the more challenging crops, but when people think about greenhouse production, the first one they want to get into is tomatoes. And from an up to chart on inputs required, energy requirements, labor management, crop management, tomatoes, and as you work your way up to peppers, are the more challenging crops to produce under structures. We have a technique we call the Guatemalan technique. We use basically a Florida wrap. Different than most tomato producers, we use determinate varieties. The reason that we use determinate varieties is that it allows us to fast crop. So what we do is we load the plant with fruit. When we feel we have sufficient fruit load on the plant, we terminate it so that we load that fruit up only. We remove all small fruit and flowers at that point, and it allows us to crop fairly precisely within our windows. Our first and primary efforts at Plant Peddler are as producers of ornamentals. Vegetables work their way through the cycles around the veggies, and so, or around the ornamentals, excuse me. And so in that case, the tomatoes have to be on a fast crop rotation. We are currently less in our tomato production because we've had a dramatic increase in demand for poinsettias. But the fall cropping opportunities with tomatoes, I think, for people in high tunnels or improved structures are very good. When you look at the market, you kind of miss the window for especially Mexican fruit when you use what we call the declining energy, which means you plant under the warm days of August and September, where you have highlight, and then finish the crop and fruit it and harvest in November, December, and early January. Or you can back that cycle up and plant earlier so that you hit October, November, and early December. And those cycles, we feel, are probably the best window of opportunity for people looking at tomato production. We produce beefsteak types. We've sorted through a lot of varieties. If you look at the lower right-hand side, that's not what we're really after. We're after a more open culture, as you would see in the plants that are on the lower left corner, where you can see through that canopy. It helps a lot in your disease management, and through that disease management, you also have better control of fruit size, and better aeration to the plant, less botrytis, less powdery mildew. If there's one part about tomato production, though, that I have to tell you is everybody loves tomatoes. Picking them, working with the crop. The gentleman that's on the left-hand side is Jason. He's my facility manager, and he's proud of his tomatoes, and the girls like going out and picking and working on the crop. In the middle of winter, it's pretty nice to have an acre or two of tomatoes to work in. This is what we're after in tomato production. That's a #1 beefsteak. And you can see that's about a day's pick that's in the picture there. Actually, that's my wife in the picture, along with the guy that helped us a lot, and I would recommend if you're going to get serious about the veggie business. That's Terry Sjogren, and he grew up in produce, starting in the store when he was in high school, and became produce manager of a couple stores up here in Decorah and Waukon, Iowa. And Terry worked for us for a period of time because he liked plants also, and gave us a lot of insight into how the world of produce works. And so I think it really, if you can fast track, I always recommend, and I've used in our business for over 30 years, experts outside the industry to help us advance our cause. So a person like Terry can bring a lot to the plate. A couple of different ways that we package tomato product. Well, I think we're going to talk more about some of that packaging as we go through the evening. But the tomatoes really go out in 3 different forms. One of them that you're looking at is the upper left would be how we utilize our smalls. Very consumer friendly. The consumers like that small see-through pack. They can look at both sides. That's in a simple shrink wrap pack. But it's a great way to utilize small fruit. For people that want to just have a tomato on their salad or a slice or two of tomatoes, those smaller fruit work well. And it's really a discounted size if you go to market with it in a single basis. The second way preferred for us are the flatted sheets, which is the larger image. Those would be some #1 quality. And then typically what would be considered #2s or canners were sold in bulk quantities, but it really depends on the market. We would steer that through. I was talking to Luke earlier about, I think, one of the biggest challenges for us as a producers within the state of Iowa is finding good home for our #2s. That's really where the profit lies in the business, and you can't afford to dump them. As I said, we did a lot of different crops in the greenhouse, and this one is one of many, and I think Luke just included a few of my slides, and if people have more questions, they're sure welcome to give me a call or email me at Plant Peddler. But this is summer squash and zucchini. That fits very well in that declining energy fall production. Very fast crop, 45 to 60 days for the most part. This is about at the 40-day stage where we start setting fruit. We use, again, parthenocarpic varieties, seedless. That way you do not need pollinators within the greenhouse. There's also a pretty good market for the male sterile flowers. So we had quite a bit of restaurant interest in the flowers and then harvesting fruit. The summer squash sells considerably better than you will find with zucchinis, but a yellow zucchini passes as a summer squash. And there are some pretty good small bush-formed zucchinis that work well in this type of cultural environment. These were typically sold in small bulk packs going to restaurant trade. I think, Luke, that takes me through the first segment.
Wonderful.
Did you
If
want
you
me
like, we can
to cover some about the markets?
sizes.
Luke? Did you want me to
Yes,
cover
sir.
market segments that we cover?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I don't want to cut Phil off too short because he knows once I get
That's okay.
Phil, you know, once I get started, I'm hard to swallow up. When we got
Right.
to the vegetables, we looked at 5 distinct market segments and spent quite a bit of time in working to develop that and learning, the wants and needs of those segments. And again, I can't emphasize homework is what it's about. I think if you're going to be in the business, you've got to take it from a business perspective, and that's analyzing what the market demands, first starting with the consumer and working backwards. So we looked within those market segments. One was our own retail. As we have a retail flower shop and retail garden center, was there a way we could augment our income on a local basis, consumers right here in our home market of Cresco area? And I think always you should look first, because that's the highest return on dollars because you're getting both, all 3 cuts, producer's cut, distributor's cut, and the retail cut. So it gives you more opportunity. We looked at institutional side, restaurants, colleges, which we've been successful in both markets as part of it, because that's really, I think, advantageous because it helps you establish a base price and you're not playing the price market. We've worked with CSAs and we continue to work with some CSA folks up here in providing them off-season vegetables so that they can continue to have CSA programs during the cooler months of Iowa weather. We've had good success in the co-op market, although the co-op market gets probably quite a bit of pressure, and when you look at the state of Iowa, there's not probably enough co-ops out there to support a large basis, but we've been successful in attracting that market to our products. Then you go to the grocery market, and that's a very competitive market, and grocers also have a very large array of products available from a multitude of sources, so they, and ease of ordering with the companies they work with lends it to be difficult for them to transition working with locals. So unless you have a local store or several local stores that really want to have and feature local product, grocery can be challenging because you're also under price pressure to match what is an international market, and a national market for fruits and veggies. Then you have the area that we've been fortunate enough to hook up with Phil on over at Local Harvest, and that's the wholesale market. And the wholesale market has a lot of beauty for startup producers, I feel, because it gives you the opportunity to focus on production and let Phil and his crew handle the marketing side. So if you can meet the grades and standards that industry is looking for those aggregators to be successful, it does allow you a lot of time to perfect the culture and to improve on the production side of what you're trying to do with your operation. At Plant Peddler, we use brokers to sell almost all of our products to some degree. We have brokers handle all of our 100% of our young plant production goes to a national distribution chain of brokers. We have about 12 brokers with over 300 salesmen in the field selling our young plant product line across the country and into foreign lands. In the case of our finished plant programs, we use brokers to sell in regions where our sales force is not effective, because we believe it gives us outreach to consumers in retail markets that we can't get to. In the case of the vegetables, I think Phil's taken a pretty good chunk of what we're doing because it allows us to not dedicate a lot of sales time resources to moving the vegetable product, and we've had a good relationship with Local Harvest on that basis because it allows us to focus on producing on a crop that is a filler for us. I think now, Luke, I'll pass it over to Phil.
All right, Phil, I've got your presentation loading up here, and you can begin when you're ready. Go ahead and switch on your microphone, Phil, in the top black bar, the little microphone button.
You hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, all right. This PowerPoint presentation is more of a selling presentation, but it'll give you a good idea of who Local Harvest is and how we interface with the restaurant business and the wholesale market, also schools, hospitals, nursing homes, and other institutional type establishments. As Mike indicated, he is one of our suppliers. I was looking today and I see we've bought over 1,500 pounds of lettuce mix from him, over 2,000 pounds of cucumbers. We're starting to buy a Swiss chard and a kale product, and we'll start buying his tomatoes as soon as they're ripe and ready to go, which is a great partnership for both of us because we then have a source in the wintertime. The reason we got into this in the first place is because our customers asked us for it. As you can see from this first slide, the sourcing of local foods has been identified by the National Restaurant Association as being the #1 trend, and in fact it has been for the last 3 years running. What I've really been impressed with is they surveyed the dining public across the country, and 70% of those that responded said that they would give preference to a restaurant that served local food. That obviously gives us a little ammunition when we go in and try to talk to people about our local foods program. How do we move to the next slide here? There we go. So why buy local? What we need to do in our situation, we are obviously the marketing arm to our growers and the distribution arm. And so we need to sell the value. Generally, local foods are going to run 20 to 30% more than the commercially California product, and that price needs to be justified. We feel that the freshness of the local product, the fact that it is generally picked at the peak of its flavor, ripened on the vine. Tomatoes are just the classic example of the taste difference that you get with local foods. Let's go to our next slide, please. Okay, another reason that we feel it's important to buy local is that, as Mike had indicated, we buy 80 or 85% of our food that we eat in Iowa comes from out of the state of Iowa and travels an average of 1,500 miles before it reaches our door. We feel that we can positively affect the carbon footprint of these products, and we answer basic social needs of being environmentally friendly. Next slide, please. There's obviously an economic advantage. We keep money in the community, and it definitely creates goodwill with the customers, and creates a positive environment at the restaurants and creates a loyal customer base. Next slide. Yes, our customers, I indicated earlier, are willing to pay more for local foods because of the quality difference and the positive influence it has on local economy. And there's this could translate into higher profits for the restaurants. They can charge more. And another thing, in our schools, the students are demanding that they buy local, and we can satisfy that need and do it in a manner where we are let's go to the next slide, and I'll move on with this point. The reason we got into it is we felt that we could buy from a variety of growers and offer our customers a wide variety of products without having to deal with a multitude of individual growers. We, by having our supplier network spread out, we buy within about a 200-mile radius right now, but by spreading it out, we feel that it shields us against, or protects us against, weather situations where it could be rain in one area and there would not be harvesting. We'd have other opportunities. Obviously, weather is a big factor, and individual growers are better at some things than others, and I encourage our growers to specialize in a relatively smaller group of products so they can produce the kind of quantities that we need and develop the expertise to create the consistent high-quality product that our customers are looking for. Could you move the next slide? That's that's one I just kind of covered. Move on again, please. Okay. Our distribution system is already in place. It gives us a distinct advantage. We already have about 3,000 customers that we can call on. We currently service about 400 of those customers with the locally grown products. Not everybody is a customer for it, but we've developed what I would say is a loyal customer base that is very interested in supporting locally grown products and promoting healthy dining, and they have also utilized a lot of our advertising, brochures, table tents, and so forth to convey that message to the public. Kind of moved on ahead on that. The marketing support, we do have in-house people who will take the artwork that we've got. We can plug in their logo. You can use it as a window sticker, a table tent, or a menu insert, and to help promote the local foods. Next slide, please. If you get an opportunity, our website, I think, it's a great tool. We're able to do a lot of things with our website. One of the most important things is to let people know what we have in stock. Obviously, local crops are seasonal, and that changes on an ongoing basis, and we keep a current website of exactly what we have in stock and a picture of the current product. We actually take pictures of different lots, if you will, from different farmers as the product comes in. So the customer actually has an opportunity to look at the product, and the local products are not always as pretty as the commercial product, but we give them a real honest look at it, and we also list in there our quantities on hand so they can order with assurance that they will get the product that they need. One of the nice advantages of being part of a wholesale distributor is we also stock a lot of these things on a commercial level. So if somebody wants to buy broccoli for a banquet of 200 and we only have 5 cases of broccoli and they're going to need 8, they can supplement with the Hawkeye commercial product, but yet they feel good about serving as much of the local as they possibly can. We advertise our growers, and more of our growers, go ahead to the next slide, are utilizing the information that we have here and highlight the growers that we have. I know some of the 2 casinos have recently started purchasing more of our product, and they advertise it on their buffets of where this food is coming from, and it definitely is a goodwill gesture, and again is a high quality product. We've differentiated our products now. We're carrying free range turkey, free range eggs, free range chicken. I'm looking at beef and possibly pork. so we can have products to market year-round and keep a cash flow and keep a viable business. We started this project through research. I have to give credit to Rich Perug and the Leopold Center. Rich, when I first started researching it, I met him at a working group meeting, and he sat down and provided me with an enormous amount of research that the Leopold Center had done, but it really helped me to sit down and understand the needs of the growers, and gave me a good perspective to deal with the growers and to understand their situation as well as I could. And we've developed some good relationships there, and the business is growing. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. I wondered if we could jump back to Mike and talk about how you start building a relationship with local harvest supply.
Well, I think one day, unexpectedly, I think Phil showed up at our door. Is that right? I think that was...
Yes, it is. That's the way I found most all of my farmers, is just getting in a car and going out and calling on people.
How did you find out about us first, Phil?
I think it was on the internet.
Okay.
Internet, and also other meetings that I had gone to, and people had mentioned your operation, and you know, it definitely intrigued me, and so that's why I came up your way.
So this is kind of the reverse of what normally goes on, Luke, because most of the time if you're a producer, you're trying to find a market. Once in a while, a market finds you. So I guess I was fortunate today. Phil walked in the door, and we've had a good relationship. I think we're one of Phil's early producers, because he was up here during, I think it was winter months, if I remember right, Phil. And
Yep.
We had a lot of stuff in production at that time, and it was the right time to have Phil walk in.
Yep.
You know, but you know, as typical of most of the other market segments that we've gone after, it's exactly what Phil says, only it's the reverse of it. I think and a lot of times, maybe because we're not full-time farmers, maybe it's because we're, you know, more on the farming mode than on the business side. But getting in the car and going out and meeting and greeting and shaking hands, I think, is the first part to building relationships. When I look at the diversified nature of our company, I've always considered one of our strengths is that we're a good marketing company, that we go make contact with customers as much as we can and really get to understand what their wants and needs are. And I would recommend, if you're thinking about working with Phil, is to, you know, Phil's more than willing to come and see you, but also, you know, it goes both ways. Even though I haven't been to your place yet, have I, Phil? But, you know, so Phil wasn't our first wholesale producer we worked with. We actually were working with two different wholesale companies, wholesale distributors up in the Wisconsin market, and getting to understand what they needed from us. Both of those had to be more grocery related than institutionally related. And, you know, hammering out what you're trying to accomplish, making sure your packs, weights, and measures, which I think is probably, when I look at you know, the number of things in the transitional part of becoming a real producer, where you go beyond farmers markets and you go beyond local retail out of your front door or off your farmstead. Probably the most important first step, I believe, is food safety and the considerations you make to ensure that if Phil or his restaurants or his institutions are serving that food are safe and secure with what we do, because the big boys out there in California and Florida and Canada, and the competition that's around us, are making sure that there's barriers to market to prevent small independent upstarts and local food systems to work. And so there will continue to be a number of barriers to market, hurdles you have to learn to overcome if you're going to be successful in producing food and being able to get it into this distribution market, such as Phil at Local Harvest. So those challenges will only become more complex as we have more and more food scares on a variety of products, most recently cantaloupe, which wasn't related to cantaloupe. It happened to be the truck was at a livestock place that got the cantaloupes. It was nothing to do with the farm practices at the farm. So you have to have those considerations. So two things that I recommend when I talk to people, we've had a number of different industry groups that we've spoken to about getting into this, because for off-season greenhouse production, there's opportunities we feel. Number one is insurance, and making sure you have liability insurance that covers the fact that you're producing food. It's a big difference in business if you're in business and you have things that don't risk human health. When you enter into the arena, that your food, your produce, if it happens to be livestock, I see the Jepsons and Grass Run Farm Zone. I'm sure they know the liability risks within their product line, making sure that you have adequate coverage, because you can lose it all in a big hurry. It can be in the millions of dollars if you start having some severe issues going on with what you're producing off the farm. So the legal considerations are very important, that you understand the risks inherent, because when you're selling off the farm, there's a certain amount of, let's call it ignorance that you're allowed. Once you get into the commercial markets, that all goes away because you're now a commercial producer. And I know Phil wants to make sure that his products coming through his door are safe and secure. So that's the first step I think is really important. Then you have to look at food safety issues, and absolutely, whether you go through GAP audits and looking at other practices that are really meant for food security, whether you go through those third-party audits, which are very expensive, or you just adapt from what those requirements are. At the bare minimum, you need to look at those requirements and understand that this is for your own good as a producer. Some of them may seem redundant, some of them may seem ridiculous, but the food security issues are very important as a producer. So you're not really only protecting the consumer and the retailer or the distributor, you're really protecting your own backside. With that, so understanding the GAP requirements, plenty of good information on the web and through resources. I'm sure Luke can help direct that. I think it's very important to understand those requirements from food safety and security. With that comes a very big responsibility for record keeping, to make sure that you have the legal side of what you're going to do in production covered before you enter into an arrangement with a party like Phil and go commercial. So first two steps. Then all the other pieces can start fitting together, because then it's more production related, packaging, branding, establishing the weights and measures and things that are important for the market. So in those considerations, and if you have specific questions, I can sure answer some of the things that we've gone through on Plant Peddler's side to ensure that our Stone Creek Farm products meet not only the safe food side of what we do, but also that we have risk management in place. Then it's really a matter of, you have to, at some point in this process, determine what your minimum selling price is for break-evens. And often it can be difficult, especially if you're part-time farming, but you should really look at your hours and input costs, analyze them, and determine what a fair market price is for your product. Because you can only produce, even if on a hobby or full-time basis, at a loss for so long. If it's a full-time basis commercial enterprise, banks aren't going to carry you forever if you're not making money on the products that you're producing. So you need to analyze it. We did very thorough analysis when we started on the 26 different crops that we produced. And as you can see from today, we've narrowed our scope considerably. And it wasn't that all those crops were not had some profit potential. There's crops I can go into great length in, telling you that I think have great opportunities for us here. But we focused on the ones that we could easily obtain a profitable production cycle within our structures. And again, we're in a unique situation because we have very high-cost facilities that we're producing within. From the marketing standpoint, we try to monitor what the national wholesale produce market is doing. to a degree, we work as much as possible with Phil to set a fair price that has some stability through the seasonality. And Phil's been very good to work with us. I don't think we have any complaints as far as his fairness on helping us secure a fair price for the commodities that we're producing. In most cases, at least from our basis, and we've produced for a number of different markets, we haven't really had a lot of contractual relationships. I know that if you enter into it, we do produce for Iowa State University, you and I and others. Quite often they'll want you to have some contracted prices. That hasn't been a situation for us because we are typically an off-season producer, and so we're coming a little bit different than most people. So in most cases, we do not have a fulfillment contract in place, so I can't really address how that is all structured as well. We typically operate by a handshake, and I guess I've had some very good attorneys through the years, and my very best one actually went to the wrong side. She's at the University of Iowa now as an Iowa State grad. That's pretty tough for me, but she's a head legal counsel, and basically Carol Reasoner told me one thing: if you don't trust the handshake, don't trust the deal. I think that's very true of what's going on in business, and so if you're going to work closely with people, I recommend that you look at that first and make sure that the parties you're working with are fair. There's a number of laws in place that relate to produce and payment of the producer on produce. There's a really great book, and I don't know, Luke, maybe you know this book also. It's put up by the Family Farm organization. I believe Family Farm is based out of the Chicago area. I have been to a number of their seminars. And it's called Wholesale Success, a farmer's guide to selling, post-harvest handling, and packaging of produce. And it is the Bible at our company. I've turned a lot of people onto this book through the years. But it basically covers, first in the book, some of the basic premises of how to wholesale produce, and a lot of the different certifications and requirements. Talks about how you get into the markets and looking at the production side, and then gets into each of the primary crops of produce and gives you the weights, standards, measurements, common units that are used within the produce industry. So if you're thinking about produce, I would highly recommend Wholesale Success by the Family Farm organization. I actually happened to get a complimentary copy from the Iowa State University bunch, but in that case, it's been paid for many times in what we've been able to pass to other producers that are starting up and helping them get successful. So it covers some very good information, and I can pass that information to Luke in case you guys aren't familiar with that book. Luke, you guys familiar with that one?
We are now. Thank you.
If you don't have that information, Luke, I can get it to you. But I think I actually got mine.
Yeah, I put a link up on the internet there on the chat box.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and mine actually did come from Leopold Center, so I'm sure the boys over there are pretty familiar with it. So that a little bit, I don't know, Luke, I threw you some images this afternoon of some of our pieces that related to production cycles and packaging. Do you have any of those slides loaded?
Yeah, I'm going to take a peek here. You want to look at the tomato sizing one first?
Well, it doesn't matter. We can kind of run through them in any order.
Here's harvest schedule.
Okay. This harvest schedule is a tool, and you may need to page around on it a little bit to give you some idea. Harvest schedule, what it looks at is so that we could, fill in people like Phil, what we anticipated for our market periods for our product. So when you're looking at your production routines, it's good to map it out. When you're going to expectation of pick, ideally it translates into pounds or the yield potential of the areas that you're planting, whether it's field crops, tunnels, and maybe it's livestock coming off the farm. But at least this way you have a visual And as you can see, we use Y's for yes, we're in season, and M is beginnings and endings, the marginal part of our season. And page down here. So the top part of it is materials that we produce in the greenhouse. The bottom portion are products that we bring in from other producers in the area and offer through Plant Peddler to our resources as an aggregator. So we do, not to the degree that Phil does it by any means, but we do have producers that are supplying Plant Peddler with various products locally grown that help us augment what we do on the greenhouse side of the business. So this gives you some idea of what we do. I don't know if everybody can see that okay, but hopefully it gives you some idea of what we're offering on the Plant Peddler side. And as you can see for us, and I'll see if I can get back over there a little bit here, our gap is April and May, because that's when we're on hardcore on the ornamental side, to make sure moms get all their flowers for Mother's Day. So our window of non-production is kind of the reverse of most others, where we're off-season during that period. Okay, Luke, you can throw me up another one.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat box from Kathy.
Trial and error. And Kathy, I think most of my trial and error period is probably my life. We typically, you know, it depends what we're looking at and what our first evaluation looks like. If our first evaluation, obviously we don't see success, we try not to repeat, but that doesn't say we won't. But we typically will run at least 2 or 3 cycles. On varieties, though, it's different. So I guess on the first reference, that would be culturally looking at the production of zucchini in the greenhouse. Okay, it looked good, and we tried 6 varieties. And of those varieties, we saw 3 with potential. So we immediately discard on the first pass those 3 varieties. And then on the second rotation, we typically will try to narrow that down to a 90-10 or 80-20 rule. So of the 3 varieties that were remaining, on the next pass to the greenhouse, we'll determine what's our number 1 variety. And then that number 2 slot, we will always be rotating. It'll be our best second variety. We may add 5% or a few percent, 1-2% of some varieties that are potentially goal being to knock off that 80%. But in culture, we have found, and this is true of our ornamentals and on our vegetable side, fewer varieties makes for easier culture. And so in that case, we tend to weed through varieties faster than we weed through crops, if that makes sense. That makes sense, Luke? I guess Kathy can text me back.
That's right.
I see another question up from Grant, and it relates to grafting. Particularly because of the fact that we're typically using new plastics and peat-based media with no mineral soil within our media. We're at typically an 85-15 peat moss to perlite, typical horticultural greenhouse mix that we grow in. That's basically sterile. We have really no tomato diseases or cucumber diseases in that media at time of plant. And those medias, if we run clean culture in the greenhouse and we see no problems, we will replant in that. In the case of cucumbers, several rotations, tomatoes typically once. So we really don't have that need for grafting. Now, I have a very good friend that I got started in this down in Kansas, on the Osha Gardens, Eric Nelson. And Eric did run a couple rounds now at heirlooms under the same cultural that we're running in our greenhouse production cycles. And Eric is grafting his heirlooms because he found that on his first pass through with heirlooms, he didn't have a strong enough root system underneath the heirloom varieties. And the grafting process is very easy on tomatoes if you're set up for that type of work. And if it is one that you need or are interested in, we do produce a number of different transplants for the veggie side for producers at Plant Peddler. And we would definitely consider taking a shot at it. It's been one that's of interest to me for quite a while. I think there's going to be a need, especially in field culture, as we get into more continuous rotation of tomatoes on a commercial basis. You're going to probably see more and more root-related diseases and pests particular to tomatoes that are inherent to problems, and so grafting will become important. There's quite a bit of work being done. Also on melon crops, I think it's becoming very important. We have the next slide up. It's just a tomato sizer. I put this in there. And we're working on one right now for cucumbers. On this simple sheet, we show what we consider our size range for tomatoes, along with what constitutes a number 1 and lesser grades of fruit based on the USDA standards, which can be found in that book, the Wholesale Success book, is where this is really adapted from. This type of visual makes it so that Phil can sell a consistent product coming out of your operation. And it's really important to remember grades and standards have been established so that people in the entire chain, from in Phil's case, the restaurant, through what Phil's representing as a wholesaler, back to all other aspects of the production cycle, that consistency allows for uniform marketing of products. So weights and measures, standards of sizes, box counts, weights that relate to items sold by weight versus size. In the case of tomatoes, we try to make a weight and a size requirement. But those things allow for the market flow to work correctly. This being visual, it's easier for people to hold a tomato. We laminate these sheets. We have them where they're out in the greenhouse. We try to do a pre-sort at harvest, at least into 2 sizes. So we try to break the large and the extra large off, and the smalls and mediums get split at pick. So we're not going through and trying to size 4 different sizes as we're going through the process. We try to handle all the fruit and veggies that we produce. In the case I consider tomatoes a fruit. We try to handle them only once coming off of the pick. So pick once, pack it once, and ship it. That way there's more opportunity to, less touches means more opportunity to make money. All right. Do you want to throw up another slide? Luke.
Yeah, let's go to the packaging one, the PDF. I'll open that. There's a question from Dustin about Which
one now?
Dustin Nelson was wondering if you're certified organic.
Oh, actually, Dustin, we try to use practices that are basically organic in our operation for production of vegetables. Because of the fact that we import from all over the globe, we import from almost every continent, I think, other than Antarctic. Because of our importation, we're under a lot of USDA scrutiny and protocol for pest and disease management. So on the ornamental side of what we do, we have to be pretty hardcore to make sure we maintain our status. We are the only greenhouse in the United States, to our knowledge, that's certified to ship to Canada without a phytosanitary requirement. We're actually looked at as a Canadian producer, and that's not an easy certification to get, but it comes with a lot of restriction. We are inspected by USDA during our young plant season weekly to ensure, because we're shipping to all 50 states and getting into Canada and getting into Florida, and some of those places that we ship to are difficult. So we can't, from that aspect, we can't run a pesticide-free, commercial pesticide-free operation. But when we look at the way we produce vegetables, that is our approach. We basically run an organic pesticide disease management program that would be very similar to what an organic operation would be utilizing whenever possible. Even to the point that if we have an infestation, rather than going in and doing something that would be heavy duty to knock them down, we'll pull the crop and destroy it if we see pressure is going to come into other crops. Up on the screen right now, and I see one of the questions relates to good sources for bubble packs, etc. This is our actual packaging chart, especially when we were first getting into it. Now, in the case if you get working with Phil, and I compliment Local Harvest for it, Phil's been really good about helping producers get standardized boxing that fits Phil's requirements. So in quite a bit of our case, we use packaging when we're marketing through Phil. Phil provides us with a fair amount of our cardboard or other requirements that we have. But probably the single easiest source for most producers is Monty Packaging, which I see, Luke, you already got that up there, 800 number. They have the most diverse product mix, and surprisingly, considering the diversity of their portfolio, in our extensive research, they probably overall have best pricing. So it isn't like you're paying a premium. Yes, small quantities, you're going to pay a little more through Monte, but that flexibility, I think, brings the startup producers quite a bit of opportunity when you're looking at getting in the market. So this shows the various codes for Monte on the top. It does show a couple other vendors down at the bottom. Shows the dimension, what we use that packaging for, and the actual cost, and then the quantity that you have, your order quantities. So it gives you an idea of your minimum orders, and so what you should have on hand during the process. We've switched a fair amount of the common boxing to use a ton of cardboard for other aspects of our business. To a degree, has moved away from Monte, but I would highly recommend them as a starting point if you're looking, for a quality one single source vendor. The National Plastics clamshells, that's the one where we use quite a bit. We use the clear polycarbonate trays. We like the clear tray because of the fact it gives a much higher visual than a styrofoam tray. People can see both sides of the fruit. We're selling a premium product to the market. We want to make sure people know that that tomato's good on both sides. That cucumber looks good. But National is pretty cost effective in the bubble packs. And then we use a couple other industries for veggie ties and stuff like that. But again, I think probably the first source is probably look at Monte is where I'd go. But this gives you an idea, and again, I think as you work through this, this is where really getting to know who your market is, because the way that we pack for the local food co-ops is considerably different than when we sell to a wholesale market. In most cases, where Phil's going institutional with it, he wants a bulk pack. When you get into other aspects of the market, they want a high-end retail pack, and that's going to separate you in the marketplace. All right. Do you have any more slides for me that you want me to run through, Luke? I can't remember what all I sent you.
Yeah, just a quick question, Mike. Do you mind if I put that PDF of the packing products in the file download area? Yeah,
that's it's okay. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing too secret on there by any means. It's pretty fair. I would not go. Those prices are probably a couple years old, so I can't stick with the pricing being accurate. But at least we'll give you some idea of some of the packing materials that we use here. I see Dustin has another. Yep, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to see if Phil had anything to add in so far. Just wanted to check in with him.
Thank you. Mike covered a lot of really good points, and a couple that were really stood out were the handling of the product, safety, but post-harvest handling procedures are very important, and the maintenance of a cold chain throughout the system. It's just amazing the shelf life of the product, differences between if a product is allowed to stay out in a warm temperature. Now tomatoes might be an exception, but other vegetables, maintaining that cold chain gives me the kind of shelf life that I need to get my rotations through and still get my customer good product. The other thing he talked about was boxes. We decided that we needed to keep standardized boxes, so I actually ordered 4 different size boxes, and we sell that to our growers at the same price that we pay for it, but that gives us consistency across the board.
Oh, you're selling those.
Are we there?
Phil, you're selling those
Yes.
things, huh? I thought those were...
It's just like freight. As part of the cost of goods sold, the packaging is also.
Yeah, I know. I'm giving you a hard time, Phil.
Sure.
Go ahead, Phil.
I'm sorry, I was kind of cutting out there. You know, there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages of the wholesale side of it. I encourage people to consider it as one of the marketing options. I think it offers you some predictability, does allow you to spend more time on the farm doing what you do best, less handling. You could specialize in fewer crops, and there's a potential market for seconds. I know you talked about seconds, and that is something that we are open to marketing also.
Great. I wanted to see if we could hold off on questions unrelated to distributors until the last maybe 10 minutes. I want to make sure we get the distribution questions for wholesaling first from the audience.
I think there's one there from Grant, though, that I think is probably important because it follows up to what Phil was just talking about, and that's the cold chain. And that can be difficult for producers, but getting that field heat out of crop as quickly as possible after harvest on all products except tomatoes. Tomatoes you do not want to, and Phil might correct me on this, but
no, you're right.
Tomato products should not be cooled or you will lose the local flavor. And one of the advantages of your local product is the fact that it will actually smell like a tomato and taste like a tomato, and that's because it was never cooled.
Yep. We maintain our tomatoes at a temperature of around 55 to 60 degrees.
Yep. And that's, Phil, you're right on the numbers. I can't imagine.
Good.
We keep one. We're fortunate. We have multiple coolers here at Plant Peddler because we use them also for forcing of crops in the greenhouse. So we have the ability to have 2 coolers set up. So tomatoes have a separate cooling area, or holding area, I should call it, because we really don't cool them. We're right around that temperature range during the warm seasons. With few warm seasons, we produce tomatoes, and most of the time we're able to hold them in cool head house areas and keep more air to them. It's important to have air movement in your coolers because just as important to get the heat out, you can dissipate that heat faster and not have any heating of that fruit or vegetable produce. If it's packed tightly, especially if it's in boxes, you can get some heating even though you're in a cool chamber. We try to use whenever possible. We have, within the horticultural industry, there's what we call a Dutch bulb curver, which is a breathable plastic stackable tray, larger in size than like mold milk crates, but basically similar in web design, which allows us to place material in coolers and keep air moving through that product during the cool process. And we use humidity within the coolers if we're in extremely dry or feel we may have dehydration going on. So maintaining those cooler temperatures, but the most important part of that chain when you're talking about fill is that initial cooling coming out of the field to ensure harvest on most of your produce. Again, I reference back to the Wholesale Success book. It does spell out for each major produce crop ideal storage temperatures and conditions.
I think I utilized that book actually and pass that on to the growers.
I guess I didn't answer. Ours are commercial refrigeration units. I think cold bots I'm not real familiar with, but I think those are the ones. I know there's a system out there that runs off of just a regular window air conditioners. A friend of mine down in Missouri that's producer, Brandon Farminar, you might see his name is mentioned actually there for these tomato boxes. Because he's got a good price on those. But Brandon has used several of those ones that just utilize a commercial, or excuse me, a residential window unit. And he's had really good success. He can only hold down to probably 45, but for most crops, that's sufficient to get that field heat out of it.
Great. I had a quick question. If we could go back to the chat box. Earlier you were talking about what distributors are looking for as far as food safety. And so my question, I guess, is, Phil, how did you know that Mike's farm was safe? What were you looking for? What questions did you ask before you started your relationship?
Well, Mike's operation was very easy because once I walked into the operation, and just the general appearance of it is, it's an indoor facility and very clean. And he, in our first meeting, he told me that he was GAP certified, and I was very familiar with that. And so, I mean, it was kind of an obvious thing. I do visit every farm personally, and we provide all of our farmers with a checklist of policies and procedures that we would like them to follow, and we ask that they conform to those things and use good practices.
I was just looking on the internet for that document to share, so I'll try to put that up in the file download box.
Okay. Yeah, that's under the growers, and I can't remember exactly the path. But we utilized Iowa State material for a lot of that. I mean, they come up with checklists that they send out to the schools, and schools is another growing market with the Farm to Market program that's sponsored by the Iowa Department of Agriculture, and they've been good friends to us also, and have recommended our company, and we sell a lot of apples to schools along with other produce items. There's certain limitations in the schools because they do buy a lot of processed produce, and we do not do any processing, and we don't know of any processing companies in the state of Iowa. That's something that Mike had alluded to. That's one of our problems, both with the proteins and the produce. There are very few processors that can handle our business.
Luke, do you want me to touch on Dustin's question? Your question relates to, can you grow organic certified materials in a mix that's similar to ours? And by no means, Dustin, do I want to come off as an expert on organic, because if there's anything I'm naive on, it's because I've never really run the organic side of plant powder. But I know that within our industry, there are certified organic medias that are available from a number of sources that would be very comparable to the mixes we're using, and may even be the same mixes. So I think with that in mind, I think you should be able to search those out. A number of the commercial companies, SunGrow, Premier, and Fafford would be three of the primary producers of peat-based medias for horticultural purposes would work. And I'm not sure if there's some nice products that are made with core or combinations of core and peat moss. Core is the coconut husks, and I know there's some organic sources for that material. Core has some added benefits in vegetable production. We have experimented with core because our core production here, I shouldn't say core, but our base production here is in peat moss. We didn't explore it very far from a veggie standpoint. But there should be some mixes available, and I believe if you do some research, or if you're running some roadblocks, we can help you with that. But you should be able to source that material, and you should be able to produce no problem underneath your hoops and bags or pots with an organic substrate. I see Phil put up another slide. This one relates to, and this one goes back to 2008, because I haven't done it recently. But this goes back and gives you an idea of what I was speaking of earlier, of the product and the cycle of harvest, and what it was. and what our anticipated harvest quantities are. So as you can see, this one has a pretty, I put it up here intentionally because I wanted a pretty wide mix of some of the things that we've produced in the greenhouse. So we maybe can kind of go down through there. There we go. So some of the fruits that we were doing, we did a primocane raspberry in the greenhouse. Primocanes are pretty cool because they flower on first year wood and adapt themselves pretty well. We were really looking at that to get an understanding if it was a possible tunnel crop for us. Also, when we look at crops like that, when the one underneath it's strawberries, because there's also a retail market for the plant material, they make some sense for greenhouse producers. We still produce a large chunk of strawberries. We produce, I think we have 5,000 10-inch baskets going for spring. The cycle that we run on that one is we plant in a fall liner. Then you can harvest strawberries off of that plant material, typically starting December, January, February. You let the plants go dormant for a resting period, and then you can market them as 10-inch flowering strawberry baskets. That's been a pretty good item for us through the years. Actually, it'll be a Hy-Vee feature this spring in one of their ads. We're using some new genetics this year that are from Holland, that first time in the United States. Looking at some pages down there. Wide variety of herbs. Herbs for us are we use vegetative herb varieties because we also sell starter plants for other greenhouses to grow, along with harvested herbs and then also finished plant herbs, so multiple markets for us. And this gets into some of those of the crazy crops that we've produced within the greenhouse. Leafy greens up above, and then we've done a number of different crops that some make sense and some don't, but really helped us set up some of those wintergreen mixes, such as beet greens and kohlrabi greens, and some of those items going into our mixes. So you can see the next column's over our weeks of harvest that we were doing during that period, estimated quantities, and then our normal pack outs, what they're going to be available in. In our case, what labeling they required, our unit packs and our cartons, estimated total yield of cartons, and then if we had a number 2 pack, a secondary pack item. So not only did our markets know, various markets that we're working with, but also, of course, our folks that are packing out plant peddler knew exactly, depending on the product they're packing, what packaging materials were required and what was the expectation going to market.
Are there any other questions from the audience? I wanted to open that up to the meat producers as well. If you have some questions about supplying your local harvest supply with some of your meat, that might be interesting to visit with Phil about the time we have left.
The meat supply chain is a little bit stickier, much more regulated. USDA requires, processing be done in a USDA inspected facility, and generally speaking, some of the smaller locker type facilities are state certified, but not necessarily federally inspected. And there's also some packaging requirements in the institutional end that are a little bit different. Hamburger, for instance, it would be packed in 5-pounders or 10-pounders. Your primal cuts of beef would be in an 80-pound box, and so forth. So some of the smaller, I've talked to a lot of smaller producers, and they just can't quite fit in what our needs are.
Phil, what kind of beginning farmers, growers do you typically talk to, and what do they need to do to get to a stage where they're ready to sell to you?
Generally I found that the beginning farmers, as we have evolved, generally aren't ready. It's you need to be in the business for a little while and have your production capabilities up to a point. Transportation costs being what they are, it's difficult starting out and supplying a wholesaler. And I've found I used to deal with a lot of smaller suppliers, and it just became kind of impractical because we need a higher degree of consistency and need to cover our transportation costs. So therefore, we need to pick up larger quantities to spread those costs out over more cases. Some people like Plant Peddler deliver to us, which definitely makes things much easier. So that's an option. And when you're delivering to us, the quantities aren't nearly as important, but giving us a regular, steady supply, using rotating your crops, using sequential planning to give us a supply of product over a longer period of time, utilization of high tunnels, I think is a great thing, and those things are really going to help in the institutional side of it, because we need those extended periods of being able to provide our customers with product. I've been buying green peppers up to last week, zucchini and squash about 2 weeks ago. So we've got a nice extended growing season, especially this year.
Wonderful. And Mike, maybe you want to address that question about pricing and wholesale marketing?
Sure, Luke, set me up, because that is I don't envy your challenges, Ellen, when it comes to that situation, because we are dealing with perishables, and as we know, in the perishable market, you often have to take a price that probably isn't as favorable because of the fact that the product has a very short shelf life. And I probably don't have a rock solid answer that I can tell you, other than at times that I've found in 31 years of selling perishable products, from ornamentals through the veggies of more recent history. Sometimes we budge, and sometimes I think you have to suck it up and dump the product in order to stand your ground, because if you're constantly selling cheaper, and what you say about your reputation and quality that you feel deserve more money, what you may have to consider is, how can I find a market that gives me a more attractive price, and really continue to search out people that are willing to pay for the product that is of quality. There is a hard set answer. When we first started back in the veggie line, I know what my input costs were, and I was often selling it probably 10 cents on the dollar to cost, because I was caught in your same situation. I was trying to just establish ourselves in the marketplace. Now, after we've been in it for a few years, and we've established a reputation and a following for our product, we're kind of on the other end. Now we can kind of hold our ground and say, this is really what we need out of our product if you want us to supply you. And so there is no hard set rule. But you are on the right track. I really appreciate your comment, in that you're saying that I have a quality product and I deserve money for it. So the best advice I can give you as a producer of record is, know when you need to stand your ground and know when you need to sell. And obviously you have cash challenges. You want to bring money into your operation and continue to find sources for your product that will help you command that dollar that you need to be successful.
Well, we still have a few more minutes for questions. I wanted to make sure that folks, if they had any last questions, there's still a few more minutes to get those questions answered. I want to thank Mike Gooder, of course, for joining us at such late notice. He really worked hard to make this work for his schedule, and really appreciate that. And Phil Danowsky as well. Wonderful to have you both here for for this Farminar. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's been enjoyable, Luke. I'm glad I was the late sub. I feel like, kind of like the 13th man on the team walking in late. But you've done a good job of getting us put together and helping coordinate the activities for the evening. And hopefully it was beneficial for the people that were listening. I can very open if people want to contact myself or other people in our company at Plant Peddler. We have a fairly active website. You can reach us through that, or it's Mike G, as in Mike Gooder, at plantpeddler.com for my email. You're welcome to use our 800 number if you want to call in, 800-827-1654. Again, that's 800-827-1654, or Mike G at plantpeddler.com. Plant Peddler is treated as one word. I'll have to give you on that one, Luke. But more than happy to help producers, find success. We by no means consider ourselves experts, but we have lived through some pretty hard knocks in all of our years on this side of the business. And I want to make sure people that get into it can be profitable and be successful and help diversify the agricultural base here in the state of Iowa. I think Mike's been very successful because he's taken a real business approach to this business. He continues to produce a high quality, very consistent product, and I think that's a real key. And he markets it well. He packages it well. All of those things you need to be aware of to market and get the kind of price that you need. Obviously, he has the benefits of a greenhouse and can market his product in an off-season, which kind of gives him a great advantage. Comes with a price. A pretty expensive tag, but.
If there are no more questions, I think we'll officially adjourn. And join us next week for our new Farminar on the topic of, Facebook. How to use Facebook to more effectively increase your farm's sales for direct or retail markets.